Hello and welcome back for this new video of China in the Global South Project. My name is Christian Géraud. I'm the Francophone editor of the China Global South Project, and every week we bring you news about China involvement and presence in the Global South, where we talk about different issues related to China presence in the Global South. Today, we are going to take a slightly different route, even though we're going to mention China, but we are going to talk more about the comment that the Kenyan President William Ruto made during the conversation he had with the billionaire philanthropist Mo Ibrahim this week, during the Mo Ibrahim governance conversation that was held in Nairobi this week in Kenya. So during that conversation, William Ruto made some comment related to the Africa Plus One Summit. The Africa Plus One Summit are those summits where African presidents are meeting counterparts from different countries. We have US Africa that was held last December. We had a China Africa Summit, one of the most regular and now famous summits on the continent. We also have the France Afrique, we have Turkey Africa, we had India Africa, we had Russia Africa, all different summits that's happening between 54 African presidents and one president for one country. And William Ruto had some comment about it. Take a listen to what he had to say about that.
We have also decided that it will not going to be business as usual. We have these meetings, Africa, US meeting, Africa, Europe, Africa, Turkey, Africa,
India.
Now we are waiting for, there is another one, Africa, Russia.
And Africa, Japan.
And Africa, Japan. We have made the decision that it is not intelligent for 54 of us to go and sit before one gentleman from another place. And so the decision that we have made as AU is that going forward, if there is going to be a discussion between Africa and any other country, we are going to be represented by the chair, the outgoing chair, the bureau.
The chair of the commission or the chair
and the chair of the Rex, and we have 5 Rex. That should be sufficient for a meeting of maybe 6, 7. Yeah. That should be able to represent Africa. And that is the position I am taking as the president of Kenya. For any other meeting that we are going to have with all these requests that we have a meeting between Africa and one other country, we respect the sovereignty of others. I think to ask for reciprocation is not to ask for too much.
No.
And for us to agree that let us have this kind of setup. The only, because I had a conversation with President Kagame, and he actually led that particular position. I have had a conversation with Prime Minister Abiy. He believes very strongly that that should be the position of our continent. Because, as you have said, if we don't respect ourselves, nobody is going to respect us. And we should be able to take that kind of decision. Yeah. And part of that respecting ourselves is when we say African problems, African solutions, we must be serious about the solutions. It cannot be rhetoric. It cannot be talk. It must be accompanied by what realistically and practically we are doing.
So, as you can hear, he made few interesting comments and observations about this summit in general. Personally, I'm going to go from the get-go. I'm not a big fan either of having those Africa Plus One Summit. It doesn't just sit well in my mind to have a continent sitting with one country. And as if Africa was one country and he has to talk about one voice. I know many Africans want to Africa to be one country. This is another debate. But seeing Africa as a continent sitting on a summit with another country with one head of state, for me, it just doesn't sit well. Having Africa plus EU summit, it makes sense. But having Africa US, Africa France, Africa China, for what that matters, it really doesn't make sense to me because, we are 54 African countries and there's only one country. I would like to say that from the get-go. It doesn't sit well with me either. But he made some comments that I had the feeling they were more populistic than anything else than factual. For instance, when he talked about the fact that they've decided that from now on it's gonna be the AU office and chair and different representative of AU office talking with one country during those summits. For me, that solution is quite populistic for few reasons. That approach is going to create winners and losers on the African continent. Let's not forget that those big summits are opportunities for small countries, small economies to have one-on-one meeting with different countries, with different head of states, to pitch their ideas, to pitch their need of investment, and their need of financing and everything. So it's kind of an opportunity for those small countries, for those small economies to have meetings they wouldn't be able to get otherwise, or they might have them, but in much more complex setting through a different difficult process. So having the head of some AU representative, the AU chair representing Africa, it's really not for me, it might not be a sustainable solution. For a second reason is the fact that many big African countries have different interests. So believing that the AU will be able to convey the message for every African countries or for every big, powerful African countries to those meetings, it's really not, it's really not viable when we know the rivalry that countries like South Africa have with Nigeria or have with Egypt and everything. So we're going to have big countries trying to push forward their own agenda. And even among big countries, as I said earlier, it's not sure that Nigeria will be pushing agenda with South Africa and Egypt and everything, unless they come together and to come in an agreement and to form an agenda for all together. But even if they do that, will they be able to include smaller countries' agenda into the topic? So when you take into account that element only, you realize that the idea, the suggestions that he's making are interesting, are valuable, but they are not realistic when you take into account the full context, the full political context of the AU today and how it relates with different African countries. In this comment, if you follow the full video, you're going to see that he's complaining about how come the AU is not able to finance $85 million to bring peace in Somalia. And that just tells you how much African countries are really not serious about this continental organization. We keep on talking about how much we need to be more independent, how much Africa needs to come together to put things together. But when it comes to about pulling resources toward the AU to give it the financial mean that it needs to push forward with the Africa agenda, we are not just there. So when I see this kind of comment, I'm like, yeah, William Ruto tried to be a bit populistic in his idea, in his agenda, but we're not really taking into account the complex situation that Africa has now. So what would be the solution? That's the big question. Because, as I said earlier, we have big countries, small countries, and small countries are not always sure to get one-on-one meeting with powerful countries, and big countries are more sure to do that. But in the same time, we also don't want Africa as a continent to have +1 summit with a big, powerful country. What would be the solution for Africa to engage in a very useful way and dignified way with the remaining parts of the world, those powerful countries like China that we have now? And one of the frequent summits that we have right now is the China-Africa Summit. So during the podcast that came out this morning, I was making the comment and asking, when William Ruto made that comment, I hope he already conveyed that message to the Chinese President Xi Jinping or to the French President Emmanuel Macron or to the US President, telling them, guys, from now on, we won't have Africa plus one. We're going to have your country plus AU and some representative of the AU instead of having the kind of meeting that we usually have. I don't know if it did that, but let's see how it's going to happen. In the podcast that we had this week, we kind of had a bet by saying that, that's not going to happen. We're not really sure to see that the next FOCAC will be different or the next TCAD will be different or the next US Africa will be different. We know that France Africa has been changed since a few years ago. Emmanuel Macron changed the format of France Afrique. Let's see if other countries are going to follow suit in that new approach. So before finishing this video, I'm gonna get back to one of the comments you made about African president being loaded in the buses and everything.
And sometimes we are mistreated.
Yeah.
You know, we are loaded into buses like school kids. You know, and it's not right.
Well, you are summoned, you know.
It's not right.
I think he's referring to the Queen Elizabeth funeral in England last year in June, where not only African president, but almost every head of state were put on the buses. You can see in different pictures here. Even Emmanuel Macron was on the bus with his wife. You can see Jair Bolsonaro in the bus as well. So that's idea of saying that, you know, they put us in the bus, it's not dignifying and everything. Yeah, we have to fact check those information. Sometimes it's not really accurate. Although I seem to remember that there was a similar case like this that happened a few years back in China. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. I'm not sure. I'm going to check that just to make sure that my mind is not playing game on me. So anyway, so that idea of saying that they load them in the buses and everything is not really totally accurate because, you know, it was in England, it was not Africa Plus One Summit. So that was all for me today. I know it was not really about China today. It was much more about Africa and the rest of the world. So can you tell me in the comment, what do you think Africa should be doing next? What should be the approach? Do you think that William Ruto is making a very valid, solid point? And the ideas that is suggesting are really viable in the longer run, or do you think that we should have a different approach? Can you leave your comment or your questions, and we're going to see if you share the same ideas or if you have even different perspective on the matters. So that's going to be all for me today. If it's your first time on this channel, click the subscribe button and click that bell so you're gonna get notified every time we drop a new video about China engagement in the Global South. See you next week for another video of China in the Global South.